Hey guys, Miles here again at Tactical Hyve, and it is another Sunday, so we're going to be talking about competition shooting. And in this episode, we're going to focus on common questions about gear, and I'll share some of the insights that I picked up during my journey into competition shooting. Specifically, we're going to be talking about kind of your rig, your belt, your magazine pouches, and your holster. So if you guys are interested, stay tuned. All right, so on this barrel, I just have a few different options when it comes to things you can use for your sport rig. Now it's not limited to just this. There's so many different kinds of belts out there. I just had this in the car and I just pulled them up because these are some of the things that you'll see. They're common. But I just wanted to point out a few things here. All of these belts here that I'm going to discuss are going to have an inner belt. So right now you'll see I'm actually wearing an inner belt. It's a Velcro belt here, okay? And typically speaking, you will have this outer belt that goes on top. So you'll have hooks on your outer belt and then loops on your inner belt. And there will also be a buckle of some sort holding it in place, typically, right? But you'll also see all kinds of different belts out there. So don't feel like you have to have this. This is just kind of easy, easy on, easy off. Others, you'll have to thread through the loops in your pants and things like that. But I want to start off with belts because clearly your holster, your magazine pouch, all that is going to be on your belt. Now the main thing that you're going to look out for in a belt, and again there's so many different kinds, is that you want it to be sturdy. So you don't necessarily want something that's flimsy where your gear is going to be moving around as you're moving and shooting and doing all these things, okay? Typically speaking, you're going to see something like this. This is by Double Alpha, but there's lots of brands, guys. Don't get really too pent up, stuck on the brand right now, but they're very, very thick, and typically you're going to be able to just easily pop on magazine pouches and holsters and all that stuff. This does not have a buckle though, okay? So there's a difference here. This is a sport rig, completely a sport rig here, where you will have that inner belt as I talked about, and then this outer belt also is a hook and loop, Velcro onto itself. And with these different brands, these sport rigs, they'll usually have some kind of cover or latch, kind of another hook and loop so that you can secure this so that it doesn't come off while you're running. This is a relatively new belt in the sense that for the amount of time that I've had it, so it's really tight still. I don't use that hook here. But if you want assurance, you can add that, okay? Now this is your typical, I guess, tactical style holster. You want to say that. It has a buckle here and still hook and loop. So there's an outer belt and inner belt. And you'll see this as well. So for those of you who have this type of belt, maybe you're in defensive and tactical training, just use this. You don't need to go out and buy this, okay? You might be asking why, okay, are there benefits to switching from, let's say, this tactical style belt to this belt? And you know what, to be honest, as long as you can put the mag pouches that you want and the holster that you want, then it doesn't really matter. Really, it really doesn't, because this is just there to hold your gear up. Now, of course, the width of your belt might be a problem. Let's say if you have a 2-inch tactical belt, 2-inch wide belt, a lot of the accessories for race guns are usually about 1.5 inches. But there are some companies that will make different widths and things like that, so you can accommodate a 2-inch belt. You just gotta make sure you pay attention to that before buying the accessories for a 2-inch wide belt. Okay, so when it comes to the style of the belt, there are other ones that collapse. There's a brand new belt out there. It's called a Lynx. And notice how if you were traveling with this belt, right, you're not going to, how are you going to put this in your bag? It takes up a lot of space, right? So this new Lynx belt kind of collapses down. And I don't have an example of that. I'm not using that right now. I don't really care too much for it at this point. Like, this is fine for me. And just like I said there, this is fine for me. Really just use what you guys have. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the holster and the mag pouches and just some tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way that can help you. But we're not going to go too crazy here with the actual pieces of gear. It's more about setup and just a little bit of the different options out there that you might be wondering about. So we already talked about the belt. The belt is the first step, and then you're going to pop on a holster and your magazine pouches. Okay, so let's talk about the holster first. If you're coming in from defensive shooting, concealed carry, the tactical style world, you'll probably have a holster, something like this here. This is more of a concealed carry holster because it's tight to the body and it's really high on the waist. Now, for sport, it's not necessarily ideal. okay? But this will still work, okay? So don't feel bad. I'm highlighting this as an example because most shooters will have probably something like this. Their mag pouches will be like this, and they'll, you know, like this as well. Their holster will be like this. You can run this exactly the way it is, not a problem. And as you get better, you can use mag pouches like this or holsters like this or that, where there's more adjustability. And that's what we're gonna get into for this video here. So when you're starting, you're probably gonna start something like this. It might be, you know, again, there's so many options, so it's not necessarily gonna match this here, but you're probably gonna start somewhere like this, and that will do. Now, one step up from that, let's talk about this holster here, okay? And then I'm gonna compare it to this holster here, all right? First off, the holsters that you're using, depending on the association you're with, the division you're shooting, it will vary. So I'm not gonna dive into that rabbit hole right now, but just keep in mind that what I'm going to be sharing with you may not apply to every single division, okay? So I'm only gonna leave that to you guys to just, you know, read the rule book and all that stuff, okay? So these are just broad strokes, recommendations, tips, and things like that I picked up. So let's say you're ready to graduate from this holster. We're still on holsters right now. You're probably gonna get something like this, right here, where there's a little bit more adjustability. You can adjust them. So if you kind of take a look here on the side view here, see it's canted, okay? So you can adjust the height, the cant, things like that, right? And this is one step up because here, this is fixed, right? You can't really do much with this holster here, but this allows you to adjust it for your own draw stroke, which I'll dive into in a little bit and actually show you what I'm talking about here. But you're probably going to graduate from this to this because there's more adjustability. Then you might be in a division that allows you to use different types of holsters, and you can get a race gun holster like this that you've probably seen me use in different videos. Now, this is not a tactical style holster. This is not something you would want to take to war, something like your gun can fall off and all that stuff. But this is more of a, I mean, this is hardcore race holster, competition holster that you can adjust everything. So not just the height of it, not just the cant forward and back, every which way that you want to move your gun, you can adjust it here. And when I get to why that's so important and kind of like the tips, this comes in handy. Okay, so when it comes to a holster, this is kind of like the broad strokes progression that you probably will get into. But one of the things that let's talk about these competition holsters here, which again are adjustable, this one to a limited degree. Notice the big difference here, right? You have one where the gun is completely exposed and one here, which is kind of similar to your typical concealed carry tactical style holster here. And the difference here is, imagine if there was a gun, I have to clear that pistol all the way out before I can break it up parallel or point my muzzle down range, okay? And again, I'll show you this with some other examples when I go over the tips of the holster position and things like that. But here, all I would need to do is just lift it slightly up. I don't have to clear this entire holster, and then I can lift my gun up towards the target. So it's a little bit faster. Let me put on this rig, and I'm gonna show you, go over a few tips when it comes to holster placement. All right, so now I have my race rig on. Let's start off where I just left off in terms of this being a race holster where I can just lift the gun up a little bit, and all of a sudden I can pull it over to my presentation, okay? So this saves you a little bit of time, whereas imagine again I had that cover, I would have to lift the gun all the way up, and now I can begin to work on my complete draw. With the talk about the different types of holsters out of the way, now again, there's a lot more out there. This is broad strokes. Let's talk a little bit about some things that you guys can do with your holster placement that might help you out, right? Everyone's gonna be a little different because everyone's arm length is different, their style, all of that stuff, okay? That being said, what I'm going to share with you right now is also going to be dependent on your division, because sometimes you might be in a division where you have limitations or there's rules as to where you can put your holster and your magazine pouches. Okay, so this is something that I'm going to share if you're allowed to. So production, if you shoot USPSA, you can't really move this holster above your hip. I don't know exact terminology they use in the rule book, but you can read it. But your mag pouches and your holster pretty much have to be aligned with your 9 o'clock and your 3 o'clock. Okay, if you are in other divisions, you can kind of play around with your positioning. So I'm going to talk from the assumption that you're shooting a division where you can adjust all this stuff, okay? So you will notice that this gun is not directly on the side of my hip, and you'll notice that it may even be, I'm gonna exaggerate here, the gun is kind of canted forward a little bit. This is going to depend on your natural draw stroke, your body mechanics, all of that. But the main point here is this is positioned this way because for me, from my presentation, this is just natural for me to come to this position. See, I'm not even drawing without looking, or I didn't have to reholster without looking. This is just the natural movement my body wants to do. And it is also from the position of me grabbing the gun, this is typically where my hands are gonna go, even if my eyes were closed. So I don't have it in a position that is not natural to what my body wants to do. So this is, once again, to reiterate, it's what my body wants to do, even if my eyes were closed. So that is efficiency, and you're relying on your body just to do what it already wants to do. So one way, kind of in a nutshell, how to find a possible position for your holster would be to get on target and just kind of go in reverse and figure out where this gun, where does it fall? And that kind of, notice how for me, it's kind of on a forward cant here. Okay, and it is not on the side of my hip, directly on the side, and it's a little bit forward. So for me, that's why I adjusted this holster the way that I did. If you have something like this, you're gonna be a little bit limited because this one doesn't have, I can't really cant this left and right. Right now I can cant this forward and back, you can see it. But I can't cant it left and right and things like that. So once again, limitations. This, you're extremely limited. You can't really adjust anything except if it's forward on the belt or more rear on the belt, okay? But that is something that you guys can explore and experiment with because the whole idea in competition, time means a lot, right? So you want to be able to get your gun in the most efficient manner. So if it's natural for you to have your gun a little bit forward on your hip, so you could close your eyes and your hand is gonna go exactly there. But let's imagine that your body wants to do that. I'm gonna exaggerate. Let's say your body just naturally wants to grab a gun in front of you because of how you're structured. And you put the gun in the back, then of course now it's not natural and you might actually have to put some conscious effort into that. Even with practice, you're still, it's just not natural. It'll be easier to just do what your body wants, okay? So those are some quick tips about the holster. Let's move on to the magazine pouches. All right, let's move on to magazine pouches. As I already talked about, there's so many different kinds out there, so many brands, and if you go with a major brand, kind of like based on what a lot of people are using, you're probably not gonna go wrong with them, okay? The main thing that I wanna discuss is a little bit about placement of your magazines, which also is going to be dependent on your style and your body, the length of your arm, all of that stuff. But I want to try and kind of give you broad strokes, recommendations and things like that based on what people do and I've been doing. So once again, this is a fixed one. You're probably going to see this. Many people are probably going to start off with in a competition with a magazine pouch like this, but you're really limited to what you can do in terms of positioning. You can only move it forward on the belt and rear backwards on the belt, right? So forward and back, all right? So what I want to discuss first is the attachment of your, and this applies to the holster as well. I forgot to talk about this, but the attachment from your holster or your magazine pouch to your belt. They can be permanent, basically screwed on, or they can be something like a clip-on, where maybe you adjust it all the time. So this is actually a clip-on where I don't have to get tools and unscrew things and all that stuff. So you can get attachments that are like that for your holster and your magazine pouches. For your holster, I recommend just screwing that in because the gun is heavier and you're probably not going to be moving the position of your gun very much. So pretty much permanent once you find that happy spot. With your magazine pouches, that might be something that you're probably going to experiment with more. For me, I find this better, okay? There is a little play because it's a clip-on and it's not super tight, but it's done well for me. I've never run into any problems. But I like the fact that it's not screw-on because I'm constantly adjusting and experimenting with the best position for my magazine, for my style and my body type. That being said, let's dive into now kind of the positioning of your mags and things like that. So we talked about the holster, and for me, my style and body mechanics, I kind of have the gun canted a little bit with the muzzle forward, and the holster itself is actually forward of my hip, in front of my hip, okay? With my magazine pouches, there's a specific reason why I use this as well, and I'm going to share broad strokes recommendations, and you're going to have to find what works for you. But the idea is, if you're a beginner, you're probably going to, you might not even know, like you might see other people with their mags like this and you start to question why, right? You're gonna probably start like this with your mags vertical, and who knows, maybe you're just putting it anywhere, okay? So with this here, there's a few things that you'll want to consider. One is the mag closest to your center line, the mag closest to you is most likely going to be your go-to mag, right? And the others are backup mags, okay? So In terms of the positioning, when you're doing a speed reload, when you're shooting in competition, you're always going to go for this one first, and the rest are your backups, okay? So in terms of the angles here and the positioning, for me, this is the best. It allows me to index my mags the quickest and the most efficiently at this time. Who knows, it might change later on. For me, this fits perfectly. I used to have it right here in the middle, and then I realized for me, just moving it off-centered a little bit was more natural for my body. So it changes, okay? But the idea here is you want to find, using the techniques that you use, you know, some people, they like the bullet. So for me, my bullets are usually forward, and you're going to see, I would say the majority of shooters there are going to put bullets forward, but again, it's a matter of style. You know, then there's quite a few who are put the bullets outwards, and there are magazine pouches for that, specifically for that. So the magazine pouches I have right now are styled for bullets forward, where if it was the other way around, you can turn this and the bullets will be, the magazine pouches out this way wide, so the bullets are outside. So it's a matter of technique here. But what I wanted to go over was, similarly to the holster draw, you want to kind of find where it's natural for you to index your mag. And most people are going to index this way with if your bullets are forward here, your index finger is going to be here like this, right? And so whatever indexing technique you use, you want to use that and kind of see what's the most efficient, ergonomic, feels very comfortable for you, right? So this is less about the technique and how to reload, but more just about the placement. And then you're going to also want to notice how this right here, this magazine pouch closer to my center line, matches the way I would index from this distance here, okay? Now, would I do this? Notice how these are in a different angle here. This is more, say, parallel to the ground. This is more perpendicular to the ground, right? And there is a reason, okay? And this is gonna go back to your own body, you know, and your style. But for me, here, coming from this position to this magazine pouch, this is perfect for me. It feels very ergonomic and natural. Whereas, imagine now this was canted this way, and I come here, now it's not. Doesn't feel good for me. So I need it to be a little bit more vertical like this. So now when I do, just even with my eyes closed, I index exactly how I would. It just feels perfect for me, okay? So once again, if it's this way, bullets out, whatever, just you want to experiment with it. Depending on the division that you are shooting, let's say if you shoot production in USPSA, you typically are shooting 10-round mags, so you're going to have a lot of mags. Let's say you're shooting a 40-round stage, you're going to have a lot of mags here, right? So with every time you have a mag pouch, you want to kind of get an idea of what's the most ergonomic for you. So this is not about specifically what to do, because I can't tell you. Your body type's going to be different, arm length, all that stuff. But it's more about the positioning of your gear. And we're not talking necessarily about the gear right now. The positioning of your gear can help you get an edge. Now, it's not going to be the make or break. Like if you're two great shooters, or let me just say this, like let's say if you're thinking it's going to be the difference of you winning over someone by a far margin, it's not really going to be the case, the positioning here, okay? That's gonna come down to your overall performance, not really your gear. But this might give you an edge in little efficiencies that will, you know, if it's a close race between somebody who's using something like this and your skill levels are roughly the same, this might give you an edge because you'll be faster, more efficient with your draw for your magazine pouch and your holster. So there you guys have it. Just a few tips when it comes to gear. There's so much else that we can discuss, and there's an infinite amount of gear out there, right? So this is not more about the gear itself, but more just kind of broad strokes, positioning, different types of holsters. We're not diving into all the little features and benefits, all the different kinds of options out there. But for those of you who are just getting into the sport, or maybe have been into the sport for a while, but never really have thought about the positioning, it can matter, especially again, as I mentioned, if you're dealing with people who are pretty much the same skill level and you're looking for a little bit of an edge, the gear can give that to you. All right. So I hope you guys like this video. Stay tuned for next Sunday. We'll be diving into more competition topics. And if there's something that you guys want us to cover, let us know in the comments.